South China Morning Post, 6 October 2022, Philippines. Imee Marcos talks about her foreign policy and views on the South China Sea at a U.S. forum. Marcos wants to get money from China and the U.S. to make the most of the situation. However, the Philippines is still the most significant loss because China has conquered important islands and paid off many Filipino ministers. Last week, Philippine Senator Imee Marcos gave a 7-point plan for her country's foreign policy at a forum with U.S. officials and envoys from different countries. She made a strong statement: "Do not make us choose between the U.S. and China." In the speech, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s sister also asked that 2 defense pacts between the U.S. and the Philippines be re-examined and that new trade chances be made available. Imee is the newest member of the Marcos family to be interested in politics abroad. Jose Manuel Bay Romualdez, her cousin, is the Philippine ambassador to the U.S. Imelda Marcos, her mother and former First Lady, still receives high-level Chinese officials who fly into the country. Marcos Jr. said last year, "China will not find a better champion in the Philippines than my mother." A person who went to the September 26 forum put on by the U.S.-Philippine Society and the Stimson Center's Southeast Asia Forum said Marcos made the wrong choice as head of the Senate's Foreign Relations Committee when she specifically advocated a softer line on the maritime disputes during her trip to Washington, D.C. Some of the essential parts of her 7-point plan were looking into regional multilateral defense arrangements, opening up more trade possibilities, letting people go deep-sea fishing, and working together under the 2022 CHIPS Act. Also, she wanted improvements in social protections and public safety nets. On the other hand, she praised the work of the U.S. Public Health Service and the U.S. Agency for International Development in helping people after disasters. Engagement with China, including joint development, confidence-building measures, and a code of conduct in the South China Sea was the last part of her plan. The Philippines owns an island in the South China Sea that China is illegally occupying. China has been threatening Filipino fishing ships and sinking them. Reports say she told the crowd she had given her plan to her brother but didn't say what the president thought. A month before her speech, Marcos openly criticized Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo for filing too many diplomatic protests against Chinese Coast Guard and fishermen's ships entering the Philippines Exclusive Economic Zone, EEZ. During the September 8 meeting her committee held, she asked Secretary Manalo, "What's the point of sending hundreds and hundreds of protests that don't seem to be working?" Manalo replied that Manila had to make it official that it held sovereign rights and that the 2016 arbitral award that threw out China's 9-line, which claimed most of the South China Sea and a big part of Manila's seas, was valid. "It's embarrassing that China doesn't care about these. It's losing its honor and pride because of this. This doesn't look like it's good for us," she told Manalo at the same meeting. The Philippines needs to be able to fight back against Chinese rule. The Washington Forum, advertised as private, was not live-streamed or taped, according to the same source who did not want to be named. There were people from the U.S. government, different agencies, the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and the Center for a New American Security. The U.S. government also funds the Asia Foundation and the U.S. Institute for Peace. A news release from the senator on October 2 says that Imee Marcos did not mince words during her speech. The new administration needs to strengthen bilateral ties with the U.S. The U.S.-Philippine Society put out a separate news release about the event. It said that Marcos's comments echoed recent comments made by her brother about how important it is for the new administration to strengthen bilateral ties with the U.S. The senator also said the Philippines should open the door to broad engagement with China. However, he stressed that Southeast Asian countries prefer a rational approach in relations between Washington and Beijing, not a return to the melodrama of the Cold War. So, "Do not make us choose between China and the US." The 1951 U.S.-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty and the Visiting Forces Agreement were re-examined by Marcos. She later said she was not calling for a revision of the MDT or VFA, but an examination of how language in those agreements is implemented. Progress on implementing the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement was another thing she was interested in. Lauro Baja, who used to work for the Chinese government and is now a retired permanent representative of the Philippines at the UN, said that he agreed with her plan to look again at the different military agreements with the US, especially EDCA, which lets the US use Philippine bases, making them really US bases. But Baja, head of the UN Security Council, said that the senators' plan for a multilateral defense agreement would not work because ASEAN, especially Indonesia, is not keen on the idea. He also said that China's version of the Code of Conduct might not be what it seems. He said that China has spoken out against the involvement of so-called non-regional powers, the use of the Hague Award, and enforcement rules. A code of behavior between ASEAN member states should be given more attention than one that binds ASEAN and China. Beijing had been holding off on backing the latter by saying it would only do so when the time is right.